The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, I'm George Hardy from Astra, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on crossing the bridge to automated invoice processing with the IFS Supplier Invoice Workflow module in Apps 8 and Apps 9. And today I've got Jackie Poloka with me. She's a senior business analyst at Astra. Most of you know Jackie. She's very experienced in the financial modules as well as elsewhere in IFS ERP. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to start off with a very brief overview of Astra and the Supplier Invoice Workflow module. And then I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jackie, and she's going to give us several demos. She's going to show us the process for automated invoice matching, coding, and approval routing in Supplier Invoice Workflow module in Apps 8, and she'll show you the changes, really what you can expect if you're moving from manual invoice entry. And then she's going to show us the Apps 9 changes that IFS has made to the Supplier Invoice Workflow module. Then she's going to give you just a quick look at the automated creation of work instructions in Supplier Invoice Workflow module using Astra's Click Learn for IFS. After that, we're going to go back to me, and I'll present a few slides and give you a quick discussion on how you can eliminate the manual invoice data entry in Supplier Invoice Workflow. And then after that, we can end with a question and answer session. You'll probably have a number of questions for Jackie, and she'll be ready to go back and show screens as well as answer your questions so you can get the specifics that you're looking for. First of all, a little bit of background on Astra. We're your partner in IFS. We've been a product and services partner of IFS since 2008. We're very experienced in IFS services, and we provide full implementations, upgrades, project management, as well as more limited engagements both in the Americas and elsewhere around the world. Over the years, we've developed a number of IFS-centric automation and workflow products. IFS is at the center of everything that we do. We've got Fast AP, which automates invoice processing. We've got a new product that we introduced this year, which automates enterprise data capture and content management. We also have Fast Workflow with Novacura for automating your workflows and interacting with IFS in the background. And most recently, we introduced Click Learn for IFS at the IFS World Conference in May. It automates the production of training materials as well as providing context-sensitive help live within IFS. Now let's take a look at Supplier Invoice Workflows module at its role in an automated invoice processing environment. The first element of Fast AP is the data capture, which eliminates manual invoice entry in IFS. Then we've got Astra's AP Connect module, which if you're using the data capture solution that we offer, it's going to transfer the data to IFS, and it's also going to transfer the invoice images to IFS. And then the third element, which we're focusing on in today's webinar, is the IFS Supplier Invoice Workflow module for coding, matching, and workflow for all of your invoices. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jackie. Jackie, you're the presenter.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. And I want to talk about how to cross over the bridge to the supplier invoice workflow. Over the past several months, we've had various companies inquire about this change, what it takes to prepare, what settings need to be taken in order to adopt this new process, going from the manual to the automated, more seamless flow of transactions within IFS. And the first item, as you all know, we always have to prepare for the change. And what you need to look at as you look to make a determination is whether you have supplier invoices that may be in a preliminary state. If you have invoices currently in your manual supplier process that are in a preliminary, whether they're paid posted or totally preliminary posted, you need to either post those invoices, code them, or cancel them so that you're ready to be re-entered once you enable the workflow process. The workflow process, there's a couple settings within the company that need to be enabled so that you can move to the workflow. But once they're enabled, there's no turning back. That's why the handling of all the preliminary invoices is very important before you make that final determination. On the company setting, on the invoice tab, you'll notice that at the very end of the general, it says use posting proposal. Once that's checked, you'll get an informational message that says, when you save, there's no turning back. It's going to turn on the supplier workflow, and the total manual process will no longer be available in the data entry screens for your users. The second one, when you enable that, the supplier workflow sub-tab of the company setting on the invoice tab will be illuminated. And then the last one is you'll be able to adjust the PO matching to automatic authorization on that PO sub-tab. This is the supplier invoice workflow tab that's been enabled. So, and you have to look at on your company setting, if you do not have this sub-tab, you need to contact IFS so that you can have this section purchased so that you can enable supplier workflow. This is where we would inherit our authorizers from purchase so that you don't have to set up additional authorizers in the workflow module, and that you can validate the postings from an entry. And the PO matching, the bottom where it says posting authorization, if the workflow is not enabled, it's not automatic, it's a manual process. The next would be, once we get the company set up, then of course there's also requirements for additional basic data within the supplier workflow module. And some of this includes the combination rules, which acts similar to the combination rules under the posting rules for the user groups, where you could attach to the various code parts and whether you're allowed to use them or not allowed to use them. And this one, of course, has a dollar limit for this particular rule, the combination rule that I set up for posting, which is $1 million. And you'll see where this comes into play a little bit later. And then we have the authorizers. So I set myself up as an authorizer, and there's two roles that you can pick. You can either be an acknowledger, which of course then if you're only acknowledger, looking at the data, making sure that it's correct, but the authorizer has to have their signature in order to finally post the invoice. And whether this authorizer can have super access. The super access enables the user to code the invoice as well as authorize that particular. So some people may just be authorizers, but some may be able to post and code the invoices as well. And then of course the final group on the dollar amount. And I also checked, you'll see that it says notify user, so that there are settings in the system that you can have messages sent to that user so that they know that they have invoices that they're needing attention, they need to authorize, or that they need to look at if they're out of balance or within a tolerance range. The next step is that you would need an assigning rule. These rules, and this is all within the supplier invoice workflow basic data settings, these assigning rules can be broad or very restrictive as whatever your company business decisions require. I've made this one very broad so that this posting rule is for any invoice that's $100,000 or less, and it can be no matter what supplier, as you could read, or recipient, or regardless of code parts. If needed, you can say that you have rules that go to certain business segments or certain cost centers or departments at different levels. So you can make these rules, like I said, very restrictive or very broad as whatever your business plan may require. The last one, and this is not a required item, is that you might consider it a sequence of steps. That maybe you want a few authorizers on this rule, so that when the system goes to put the invoice in and it has the authorization, you may have one authorizer, you may have several that need to do in a certain fashion, and so that when you have the notify user, there's the next authorizer would get the next authorization notification that they have something to be authorized, not at the first level. Now we're going to take a look at just what you're all familiar with is the invoice processing. So the invoice, the data, the initial screen is exactly the same as you have today, except you'll notice that the bottom section where the posting information is now grayed out. So that would never be able to be data entered there. You'll be able to view once it's finally coded, but the initial data cannot be entered at the screen. Without the fast IP that George had spoke earlier, or the e-invoice process, would be still a manual. So your fast AP would eliminate the data entry in this screen. Once you save the transaction, you would right mouse button the header and go to the posting proposal. This is where all the work that you go to once you have the fast IP and the automated portion of the supplier workflow. So this is our posting proposal, and you can see that this particular item that the coding is done, and if by chance that you set up some on the individual suppliers for the automatic cost code string, it will populate the data that's listed on define the cost code string, so that the user doesn't even have to code the invoice. It would come over as fully in balance, and it would be waiting for authorization. The authorization is performed on the sub-tab for Authorize, and you would just highlight the line item, right mouse button, and Authorize. Notice that at the bottom where we have the authorized details, that it's called the post rule, that it invoked the post rule that we had previously set up under the supplier invoice workflow basic data. Once it's authorized, it's ready to be final posted. But you have one other option that you receive from the supplier workflow that we didn't have previously, is the history log. The history log is a tool that will timestamp and give you the users that performed every function on this invoice. So when you authorize it, or you change, or you made some changes to this history log, is always attached to the posting proposal, attached to that final invoice. That can always be reviewed even at a later date. So the final post, you can do it manually like I showed here in the header record, or when we go to the application, I'll show that you can do it in batch, or you can even schedule it so that once everything's authorized, the system will automatically post your invoices. If you're using the supplier invoice, the posting authorization within purchase orders, and you have your rules set up for authorization and your purchase orders have been authorized, as this one has been done when I set the rule as SIWF for supplier invoice workflow, and Carol Kelly authorized this purchase order, and the purchasing goes through their normal process. They release it to the supplier, we receive it. Once it's received, the supplier invoice is ready to be matched to the receipts. So the manual supplier invoice is created similar, but referencing the purchase order, and it's in the same status as preliminary posted. The right mouse button in the header. And when we go back to the posting proposal, you'll see this one again has been created, it's authorized, and it's ready for final posting. move to the Authorize tab, you'll see that the authorization called the supplier invoice workflow, not the post one that we had used for the true manual supplier invoice. There's the workflow. It's authorized and ready to be final posted. Now I'm going to change over to the application and just show you how some of the posting proposals will work in conjunction with the data entry that we had. So here is the overview of all the posting proposals that were out there. You can see that you can select whether you want everyone's, whether you want to look at only what you had called for your authorization, which would then only give me my responsible items. Or like I said, if there was a subordinate, you only want to look at, if you were the super user or super access, what other people need to attend to. The posting proposals give you a good description of everything that needs to be done. So this one is fully authorized, and that's why the status is authorized. These three are waiting to be authorized. So what I'm going to do is just highlight the three lines, right mouse button, and authorize those so that you see that they change to a new status of authorized. Take just a few minutes. Of course, when you authorize, you do, and the system is just a little bit slow, as we know sometimes does happen. And my name is then, and it's manual entered. You don't need to save, you just need to authorize. And this one is one left that I had too, but since I had super access, I'm going to authorize in Carol's stead, only because then otherwise I would have to log on as Carol. And I'm just going to show the history log on this one, since we had the two authorizers added for the Carols and then myself, but I performed the authorization for everyone. I'm going to go back to our posting proposals and just refresh this screen. So these are all now, they're all now in an authorized state. Just want to give you an idea of what another nice feature is when it tells you posting is in balance, but the authorizer is missing. If you recall, when we set the rules up, this particular invoice is for $1 million. And even though my said that I could authorize up to $1 million, the posting rule that I said it was only up to $100,000. So this one, it didn't naturally bring the authorizer. You need to look at it and add the authorizer, because it didn't have a rule that said who is the authorizers up to $1 million. The next one is from a purchase order that the purchase order came in at $500, but I've received an invoice for $600 instead. So the purchase order was not, and the purchase order number is here, it was not sufficient to support the invoice, so it's an insufficient value. This item is that the invoice came in and it was higher. The anticipated receipt was at $1,200, but the invoice came in at $750. So there's a variance of the $450 that would need to be addressed, and it would be sending messages to these authorizers that they would need to handle those special instances. So if we wanted to work with this screen, you could go back to the posting proposal for these items and authorize. But IFS gives you the final posting proposals so that you can look at the ones that are ready to be authorized. I'm just going to put it in alphabetical order. I'm going to refresh this screen for the ones that I had just authorized, so they all come over authorized now. And from here, you can highlight, right mouse button, and final post everyone. The two options that you need to consider, though, is whether you want it based on this voucher date, or do you really want it based on the invoice date for the authorizations, for the postings. Because at the end of the month, it would be important that maybe you do it based on the invoice date so that you have your expenses in the right period and not the date that that you perform the task of final invoice posting. And this one also is you can schedule it. This is what I spoke about earlier, that if you wanted to take a look at and have this done automatically, similar to the transfer from inventory and non-inventory, or the updating of the general ledger automatically, you can have this done at the end of the day or throughout the day, and schedule the transactions to be final posted if you enable the schedule, just as any other task that's created within IFS. So that performs at an interval daily or scheduled at certain times of the day, whatever your business needs would require. I'm just going to do these in a batch. Just do these all final posting and let the post to today's date. And they'll be out there at at the accounting hold table, ready to be posted to the general ledger, either manually or updated as your routines may be scheduled. Since there are a couple, will take just a little bit of time. I'm going to move back to the final screen of the slide to look at some of the enhancements for the App 9 within supplier workflow. The beginning portion is the same. The supplier invoice is the same, and of course, like I said earlier, that with the Fast AP or the e-invoice, those items can be captured automatically, so that the user doesn't have to enter all that data, and you can move straight to the posting proposals, whether it's the preliminary one or the final one to do the final posting. What's new with this also is the posting templates, and for anybody that uses the automatic posting rule for the general ledger, where you can set rules up that allocate to various code parts, and when it posts to the general ledger, it will do the allocation and perform and have individual items recorded in the general ledger. This posting template works similarly, except that it works on the supplier invoice, and you see it automatically. So when you evoke the posting template and you have an allocation that maybe you want to allocate to various departments, it will be part of what you see when you go when the invoice is created in the supplier workflow. It's not available just in the manual process. The posted proposals also support multiple invoice types. As you know, we have advanced invoices on supplier invoice. The supplier invoice that is attached to the purchase order, it recognizes those and captures all the data from the advanced invoices. When we looked, the second one is the message IDs. When we looked at App 8 and we were in the posting proposal, you only could look at and see if it was yours or if it was the next authorized or subordinate. You couldn't look for the specific IDs of all the messages that we had that were listed. This is new, that you can just search for those types of messages. And then, of course, all the finally posted invoices are much smoother. We also have a new role that you can create for the user that is over and above the superior or the super access, is the admin role. The admin role, it makes it for a little easier to authorize invoices in a new screen. Instead of, remember, we looked at App 8 and we went to the authorization, we had to go back to the posting proposal to authorize. This enables you to authorize right at the overview screen. You can also set the last author ID as an authorizer so that everybody else would acknowledge the supplier invoices, and then the last one would be the only one that could authorize it. If you have the purchase order authorizations, this works similarly. The next one with the group authorizations, where you can set up a group of people so that it will flow through to the group without doing the sequence of steps. And then also the change in authorization limits, so that maybe for a period of time, authorizer should inherit a higher level because, you know, people do take vacation and people are out of the office, and you need to just manage the dollar amount for a certain period of time. And the next is the selection criteria in the posting proposal. Works hand in hand with the new message ID, so that we can look at the new criteria that when you populate your posting proposals. And the instant authorization works with the admin role. That was I spoke, so that you can right mouse button and go to the instant authorization. We're going to take a look at the App 9 screens that you'll see are different from the App 8. So this is App 9. For all that, if you haven't seen it yet, this is a real new look and feel to the whole application. So you can see the posting proposal. This is just that we're going to look at every invoice that's out there, and I don't have the same invoices in both applications, so there aren't as many here as there were in App 8. But this is the message ID that I spoke about just a minute ago, that you can pull down and look for ones that have been authorized. It would only populate then the items that have been authorized. Or if you want to look for ones that are awaiting authorization only, you would get those items, so that you can, rather than just clicking as I did in App 8, where I kept sorting the status so that it would give me only what I wanted to see. This is where, being on the admin role, you can do the instant authorizations, so that you would have who the authorizer was. That's an individual setting, and if we just scroll down the screen, and this particular invoice is one that we invoked the rule for the allocation to use the template. I set this template up on the supplier to say to allocate a percentage over the various cost centers for whenever the invoice was recorded. And then we could just do the check mark to authorize, instead of looking back at the other screen to go back all the way to the posting proposal. I'm just going to change this and refresh so that we get now I have I have 3 that are in the authorized state. Similar to App 8, the App 9 also has the final posting authorizers. So this, we refresh it so it brings in all my authorized. I'm going to click and put in order. And this has the same as the prior, where you can final post, or schedule or if you wanted to go back and take a look at the posting proposal. And you can see here that this is at final, so that instant authorization is no longer available here. It is only, this screen is only used to do the final postings for the various posting proposals. And George had mentioned earlier on in his talk also that we were going to discuss a little bit with the Quick Learn. The Quick Learn is a very easy tool to step through and how you have your training documents set up. So everything that I spoke about, where I went to, you went to the financials, and going to the supplier invoice, you step through this, and this Quick Learn will give the users, or give the person you're training the steps that you've all documented just by you clicking, and rather than cutting and pasting and doing all the screen captures that you have to do, is just the click, and it will create the document for you. And you have choices that you could do a PDF similar to this one. You go back here, and you can do the flash video. So it just by the click and learn.
Tool strip item home. You may also press Alt/Home. Click on the navigation folder Financials. Click on the navigation folder Supplier Invoice. Click on the navigation item Posting Proposals.
And this is where we
Click
set
on
up
the drop-down button Status Message ID. Click on the selection item. Click on the menu item drop-down search. Click on the menu item populate. You may also press F2. Click on the tool strip item home. You may also press Alt/Home.
So, in addition to this one, you can also just have a Word document.
Click on the tool strip item home. You may also press Alt/Home.
Oops. Want him to stop. And I just want to show you that also there's an interactive HTML, so that the user, when they tell you what to do, you need to
click on the tool strip item home. You may also press Alt,
and it'll go to the next step.
Navigation folder Financials.
Whereas
the
other did these for you. It's you must click on as they tell you.
Navigation item Posting Proposals. Click on the drop-down button Status Message ID.
I'm just going to stop that because it'll go through the same steps. The other one did it for the user. This one, after they looked at it, they would have to go through the steps and do the steps individually. All right. I'm going to turn the presentation back over to George. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jackie. So Jackie's shown you supplier invoice workflow in Apps 8 and in Apps 9, and she's shown you how you can use it to automate your processing, the coding, the matching, and the workflow routing within IFS. Now here's the broader picture of supplier invoice workflow within the FastAP process flow. So if you have FastAP, then we can pick up your invoices. First of all, if they come in through the mailroom, you drop them on the scanner. You don't need to put separator sheets in. We can separate them automatically. If they come in through your fax server, we can monitor that and pick them up right there. And if they come in as email attachments or as EDI, we can pick them up directly. Once they're picked up by FastAP, then they're immediately interpreted If they're interpreted without any problem, then they'll be sent directly to Astra's AP Connect transfer module. On the other hand, if either you decide that you want an individual to validate them, or if they fail the confidence level threshold that you set within FastAP, then they'll be kicked out to the validate station where your AP staffer can review them, make any necessary correction, and then approve them to be moved forward. Astra then takes the invoice data, creates the invoice record so you don't have to do it manually within IFS, and it takes the invoice image, either in a TIFF or a PDF format. It stores it in DocMan, classifies and indexes it, and it attaches the invoice image as a clickable image to your AP screens. And then, as Jackie's shown you within IFS, if it's a PO-based invoice, IFS is automatically going to do the three-way matching and coding, and if there's a discrepancy, and if the discrepancy exceeds any tolerance level that you've set, then it's going to be routed automatically to the approval hierarchy. If it's a non-PO based invoice, you can set up a default approval hierarchy and default coding, so you've got a posting proposal, and then it will be coded automatically and it will be routed automatically to the approval hierarchy, since in the absence of a PO, it's going to have to be approved individually. And then it'll be marked as ready for final posting in the query posting proposal screen. So the objective, of course, is to stop processing invoices manually, to get as close to touchless invoice processing as possible, so that your AP staff, instead of pushing the process, is only intervening where human judgment is necessary. The ROI is very significant. The numbers here come from the Aberdeen Group, 65% savings with automated AP processing. I could show you similar numbers from Forrester, from Paystream, and from other leading analysts. But that's the value of it. And of course, your staff is then more productive and has got time for the higher value add activities. I'm going to open it up for questions now. I'll take a look and see what questions we have, and then we can pass them to the appropriate person. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the question screen. Okay, Jackie, I've got one question that's come in, and the question is just really based on your experience. How difficult is it, to move from the manual invoice entry process to supplier invoice workflow? What kind of training does it take?
It's really very simple. The biggest thing is, of course, is making sure you don't have any preliminary invoices, because I was just at a client and they didn't do that, and they had items that they could never process because they were grayed out, and they said, oh, if we only knew. But that's what it is. You want to make sure you handle all those preliminary, and the training is that the users will be authorizing and look to that posting proposal screen. So once you've set all your business rules for posting invoices, and that's all done by, that's an admin setup, that the user it's very simple for the user, because all they're looking is to analyze the posting proposal screen, where, and we'll go back to the app 8, what questions, what status, and what to do with these. If it's fully authorized, there's nothing else they need to do. Handle the ones that have exceptions, and then move forward. It's whether it's out of balance, there's no, it gives you right on screen what the dollar amount it is. Like, when you do the manual process, you've got a right mouse button, match the PO, and that screen tells you where you're out of balance. This one is, you look at the overview on the posting proposals.
Click on the menu item drop-down search.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. We've got a few more questions that have come in.
Okay.
The first one is, can you set this up by supplier, or is it all or nothing?
No. On the rules, and I'll go back to the slide where we were setting up the rules, look back up
Jackie,
here.
do you want me to make you the presenter?
Oh, that would be great.
Okay, so hold on one second. Let me do that. Okay, Jackie, I see your screen.
Okay. On this authorize or assigning rule, you can make it based on the supplier. This one I particularly said it's regardless of supplier. But you can definitely list suppliers, have a rule for certain suppliers, or if it was even code parts, whatever your business requirement would be. The one client, they said they needed ones that they didn't want anybody else to look except for one person.
You may also press F2.
I don't know why that's running. The supplier for their rent, for their utilities, for all that, they wanted a special rule for that, and they just listed those suppliers, and it went to a certain person just to automatically authorize and post the invoice. Another question?
Okay, yes. The next question is, how does it handle freight charges? Does it know how to handle them automatically?
The freight charges would be, it depends on how users want to set up their freight. Some companies, they set them up as a non-inventory purchase part or a no part, and that of course would be the posting control and be handled that way. So as long as it was with the receipt. The other items that would come over as a charge, and it would be part of the charges that would be included in the invoice. The beauty of when you have the Fast AP with it, you can carve out what are to be freight charges, and then it more seamlessly codes those, because it's going to look at either the rules for the charges, or it's going to look at the non-inventory part that's being pulled over. So yes, it does handle the charges.
Okay, if there are any follow-up questions to the ones Jackie's just answered, please go ahead and type them in. Here's one related question, I think. Can it automatically handle credits for the IFS module supplier returns, Jackie?
Yes, yes, because it's going to look at whether it's a debit or a credit. The item isn't going to, it's going to follow the same rule. So either if it's a credit memo that you need to code, or if you have the default cost code string, it would read the code string and bring over the same coding based on how you have the supplier set up. The credits, whether it's that's what we mentioned, it handles even in App 9 all styles of invoices.
Okay, great. And then we've got another question. Will we receive copies of these presentations tomorrow? Everybody who's registered for the webinar or who attended it today will receive a link to the recorded version of the webinar. And if you'd like me to send you a PDF of the slides that we presented, just drop me an email and I'll be glad to do that. I think another question's come in, Jackie. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Okay, here's a question. Does it verify the lines? Does it verify the lines, if the lines were received before it enters the invoice? If the item has been received, will the invoice still be entered?
Okay, so in App 8, there's not the setup for the line level is not as strong as it in App 9. In App 9, when you set up your supplier and on the PO authorization, and I'll just go to App 9 because that is a valid point. I'm just going to use this and just go for supplier. And I'm just going to zoom to the supplier just to show you the new screen, the new setting rather, on the supplier. On the invoice tab and the PO matching, in order to facilitate a better matching process at App 9, it has the receipt reference. So this marries then more easily when you have, when you see one of a certain number, so that it looks at both the PO reference and the receipt reference, so that it links those two, rather than if you match at the header record and the line, there's a better connection in App 9. This particular setting to validate is not in the App 8 version. Okay. Hopefully that answered the question.
Jackie, here's a question regarding approvers. The question reads, does the workflow send emails to the approver, and does it send them reminders to approve?
You may also
yes, there are the settings for, and since I'm here, we'll just look at the settings. The basic data for the workflow is, let me just go back up here, is the notification schedule. So you remember when we were setting up the authorizers, we had a checkbox that said, you know, they're to receive a notification. So here's the schedule that can be automatically set up and scheduled, so that you can notify, like I said, when they're due, whether, you know, who's the next authorizer, and the waiting status, so that you can set this up so that you know who's to get that maybe that an invoice has been sitting out there too long to prod someone else to get that invoice authorized.
Okay, great. A couple more questions have come in while you were answering that one, Jackie. First one is, how does it handle partial receipts?
Like I said, it's going to depend better on whether you're in App 8 or App 9. App 9, of course, has our new functionality with where it looks to the receipt reference, and we'll do the partial receipt because it matches that. In the partial receipt on the App 8, it will come over, it will be out of balance, but you can do, you would have to do a manual match to the receipt that came in for that line item, because that connection to the with the PO matching is not available in App 8.
Okay, and another question from the same person. Can you cancel an invoice that was finally posted?
Yes. Similar to what you have, it'll tell you that the item has been finally posted, you know, but you can still cancel the invoice without a problem. Of course, as long as it wasn't paid at all. As long as it was just posted, authorized, you can cancel just in the same format that you do today.
Okay, great. Here's a question, perhaps this one's for me. Does the email contain the attachment of the scanned invoice? No, I guess it is probably for you, Jackie. So, you know, if they're, you know, maybe the email this person's referring to, I'm not quite sure, is an email to the approver telling them that they've got something to approve. Does that contain an attachment of the scanned invoice?
What I've seen with an IFS has the Notify Me process, where you can even see it on your phone.
Right.
So the Notify, and it does, yes, include the capture of the invoice on the Notify Me. And I've seen that. I have that on my phone as a training tool, that when you look at the invoice that you need to authorize, it does have you can look at the screen of the invoice.
If the person who asked that question has any follow-up question, please go ahead and type it in. I'm not entirely sure that we focus specifically on what you were looking for, but maybe Jackie did cover it. So we'll wait a couple of seconds, Jackie, to see whether that person has a follow-up question or whether anybody else has a question. It looks as though we've answered all of the questions that have come in so far.
Good.
Here's another question. Is this only available on the Notify Me app or on regular emails too? So this is from the person who's asking, or
But
whether the email contains the attachment of the scanned invoice.
Click on the navigation
I'm gonna-
item posting proposals.
I'm going to say I'm not 100% sure, but the link would be there to come back, and the scanned invoice would be there, because you need to go, even if you get the invoice, you still need to go to the posting proposal to do the authorization, because you're not going to be able to authorize from the email. You need to go into the proposal. Of course, we'll then have the invoice as part of the proposal. The Notify Me does have it, so you can authorize it from your phone.
Jackie, is the scanned invoice, how is that going to be available? Would it only be available if they have Fast AP, or does Supplier Invoice Workflow have some functionality that would enable you to make that available?
Yes, you could do it just through the scanned documents. You would.
Mm-hmm.
The users just scan the document in and do through the document attachment, attach the invoice right, and it could be displayed right with either the supplier manual supplier invoice or on the posting proposal. But all those documents are available as to be scanned in today.
Okay, great. I think that answers the person's question. Well, no other questions have come in, so thanks very much, everyone. We really appreciate your joining us today for this webinar on the Supplier Invoice Workflow module. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.